Any opposed? I don't see any opposed.
None opposed.
First item up, item B, animal control request for proposal. CAO will be here to enlighten us.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we had the dog control request for proposals on the agenda at the last meeting, and we ran out of time and didn't get to it. This is an information item, and we just want to advise the board that our current contract expires December 31st, 2022, and that we did go out for proposals, and we are in the process of that. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Petrie, and he can bring committee up to date.
Thank you, CEO. Mr. Petrie, please.
Great, thank you. So yeah, really this is just a chance to discuss the animal control RFP and just discuss the animal control and dog control service in general. So just to bring it to the forefront and discuss this. So thanks for Chris for giving some tips. He said just on the PowerPoint, lots of cute pictures of puppies and dogs. And anyways, so we can get that PowerPoint up. Yeah, okay. So and thanks for the questions too from some of the directors for allowing me just to kind of deal with those. It gives me kind of a sense of where you're at with it and kind of also the understanding of what we're trying to do with this. So there's not a ton of changes. We're trying to make it more competitive. The last contract we only had one bidder, so we're trying to do a better job of advertising it, and we pulled some of the municipalities, even mistakenly Area H at one point, but just trying to get them understanding, see what some of our options are to try and curtail this, so that way maybe there's some shared services. So we came up with a few ideas, nothing drastic, but we'll try and go through some of those points. So, okay. So Danny, do I have this on full screen? Is that? Yeah. Okay. All right, so, and then really at the end, we'll try and have a little bit of dialogue. Some we've already had with some of the directors personally when they called me, but we'll try and bring that out so everyone can discuss those key items. So I want to be clear, this is slightly different than the bylaw amendment that's proposed for after this. They are tied in, of course, because the contractor would provide some of those services if they are to be dealing with barking dogs. Okay. So the service area is all rural areas excluding Area H and municipalities. So there's no change there. And a key point that barking dog wouldn't be included in Area B and G. We did make that change at the board meeting. It was suggested to change the animal control bylaw. So the RFP would now include issuing fines for barking dogs, or at least dealing with them, except for B and G. But we'll go through that later and on the next talking point. So today, let's move on to the next one here. So the whole point of the RFP is to carry out the regulatory services contained in the animal control bylaw and dog control bylaws. So really what we're trying to encourage, the intent of these bylaws is responsible dog ownership. And we do follow the RDOS policy of voluntary bylaw compliance. We try and work with them. We don't go guns a-blazing, finding people. It's usually a letter campaign, advising them of the bylaw requirements. And then we amp up, let's say, enforcement if we have to. But in general, most people would comply, and we work with them and try and provide a service to them. So also we're trying to minimize the risk of aggressive and dangerous dogs to the public as well. That's just the fact of owning dogs. It's not the prettiest job in the world. I know there was one incident, for example, where we received a call, or the animal control officer received a call. There was a dog that had been attacked on their property, and the other two dogs were still at large, pacing over the body. Now they have to go and deal with that situation. So first they got to mitigate the risk of those dogs that just fatally attacked this dog. And then doing the investigation afterwards. What do you do with these dogs, right? So that's all part of their training. It's pretty specialized. And at that point, depending on, often owners, they'll work with the owners to decide whether they surrender the dogs. But they will start going down those roads, and they'll be following case law. and just the current training and trying to decide how do we minimize the risk to the public in the end. So the bylaw has some revisions if it is deemed a dangerous dog of containing them, and they'll monitor that. So that's part of their contract as well. And then we'll also go over some of the costs today. And all right. Oops. All right, so the active patrol, so we only currently do that in Area E in the public parks during summer months. So that was, I believe in 2019, that was discussed, and they ceased all other active patrols unless requested by the directors. It did not result in a change of the contract cost, though. I went through some of the old reports and discussions, and it was the only thing they saved on was the kilometers driven. So in this new RFP, we're hoping that that will be encompassed right off the bat. As is, we're still just proposing Area E unless other directors want to have monitoring in their area. So. Also, the animal control officer, this is a good point. We're also the first point of contact often. So if there is a cruelty situation or some sort of concern about the welfare of an animal, we're the first point of contact, and then we might defer it to the SPCA and other agencies. So that's another service they provide. So in the new RFP, again, nothing crazy. We're just really trying to encourage a healthy community through public education and responsible pet ownership. So currently we have a separate contract for the boarding and kenneling. It's about $15,000 per year, split in half. So we want that to be incorporated and have them manage their own kenneling and boarding contracts. And we're hoping that might encourage some shared services and maybe some scalable cost savings. Who knows? We'll have to see what happens. Then obviously we're going to outline the specialized training experience required. These have to be competent people. We can't just have anybody saying we're going to go deal with dog control. We got to make sure they have a track record. And then we're proposing a 3-year period. And we want to make sure we're staying on top of it, monitoring it better. So one thing with the last one, maybe the monthly reporting wasn't as good as we wanted it to be. So we're going to try and reinvigorate that one. And we'll outline the expected professional standards of the officers. So even though they are contracted service for us, we want to make sure they're still following our policies and procedures and performing the functions how the RDOS would want them to perform it. So we'll stay on top of that and monitor that. So cost, sorry, it's a bit small for those who can't see it. So the tax requisition in 2022 was $133,000. If you can see it, it is broken up per area. Sorry, it looked a lot better on my screen. And also the number of complaints per year, it does vary. So you can see your area. Area C was very active in 2020, and then the next year they had about a third. I see that correctly. So it really depends on the scenario, the situations. Maybe where often you get a lot of transient workers. I'm assuming that might have been that year. We were getting lots of complaints down there for that. So, and also if the animal control officer is doing their job properly, they should see a reduction, right? That's the whole point. So we're going to be educating the public and trying to make sure that the people who are dog owners and non-dog owners are getting along. So the basic process, we're going to be advertising on our website, LIBOA, which is the main bylaw officer's website, and then the Civic Info, which is a great spot for all municipalities and regional districts. And then we're going to follow our RDOS purchasing and sales policy to choose the successful bidder. So we've had some interest already. So there's some people locally and more than one, which is good. And really, we're just trying to encourage fairness and equity for the potential bidders. And then in return, we're hopefully going to get better value for the taxpayer and service. Okay, so now we're going to open it up to see if there's any discussion or dialogue that you guys want to start. And oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Petrie. So questions for Mr. Petrie, and bear in mind at this time that I don't have visuals on the board.
Do you have a question, Director Bloomfield? No. Not a problem. Director Gettens has her hand up here. Director Knodel?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks. Just through the chair, I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly. So the new requests for proposals, all area gets responses, like if you call it a complaint, except for area H. Barking will be controlled under every area except for B and G. The only active patrol is area E. The current level of services will be maintained, but there's no longer any barking management from this. That'll be under the noise bylaw instead. Is that correct?
Go ahead, Mr. Petrie.
Yeah, so it's actually being taken out of the noise bylaw, or it was taken out already with the previous amendment, or new bylaw, sorry.
Yeah.
And we're trying to reinstate that now through the animal control bylaw or dog control bylaw. There is a definition already in there. We just need to adjust some of the wording, which we'll see on the next talking point.
Okay.
What we're trying to do.
And just as a follow-up then, Chair?
Go ahead.
Okay,
Director.
thanks. So are we looking to increase, like when you do a request for proposal, are we looking to increase this amount that you want budgeted for this service?
So,
Mr. Petrie?
well, it's a competition, so ideally we're trying to encourage competition to bring
Okay,
costs down.
yeah,
And but it's really up to them. We can't force people to submit a certain number, but just try and create the environment that creates competition. So
okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Director Kettens. Any other questions, please? If there are none, I do have two. I would like to see Area C included in the exemptions of B and G. Also, item 4.1 on entry of property, the Ombudsman stated that ample notice, I believe 24 hours notice, should be given for any bylaw officer to enter a property where there is no urgency in need. Would we be looking at adopting that as a policy, or are we just going to go ahead as we have been? It causes some issues. Mr. Petrie, sir?
yeah, we're currently reviewing that right now. Typically, we would try to give them notice, but if we are responding to a dangerous dog, there would be a sense of urgency on that.
Yes,
And our
sir.
ability to enter onto the property would be protecting the Local Government Act.
Fair enough. Thank you, sir. Any other questions?
Director Taylor has his hand up.
Director Taylor?
Two questions. First, sorry, just having a gray moment here this morning. What's the basis of allocation across the different areas? And secondly, is there a way of getting more information regarding the mileage? Because it seems like mileage per claim is high. To my way of thinking, just looking at the size of the region, and if they're called on a complaint basis, how do we get to 400 kilometers a claim?
Okay, so yeah, like that might be a bit misleading. I can dig into that better, and I can try and hopefully explain that better. Part of that would be monitoring of properties. If a dog is deemed dangerous, they would monitor the fencing and security requirements. So there would be a few trips sometimes. They are dispatching, I believe, from Penticton. So if they are going down to Area A, there would be some additional mileage incurred to do that a few times. But we can get a better, I should make it clear though that the mileage was cut in half for 2022, and just the stats I had taken because they're completed, I took from 2020 and 2021. So a better reflection would be about half that mileage for last year. One of the directors had emailed me and I provided that.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Director Taylor?
Should I? Sorry, there was one other question. So the cost allocations are based on assessment. So BC assessment.
Mr.
Director
Petrie?
Gettens, his hand's up.
Director Gettens, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So are we looking for some direction here? Because if our current contract ends at the end of this month, we probably want to get going on putting this request out so we have coverage for the new year. Is that what we're looking for then? Okay, because I'm in favor of where we're heading with this. I think we should see what we get back for some proposals.
Mr. Petrie?
Yes, yeah, that's what we're trying to do here. So this is, yeah, we did it last week. Sorry, I was planning to bring this before we issued that, and but it got deferred. Yeah, but again, we're still working. We haven't signed any contracts, so we can still see what we can do.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for Mr. Petrie? I don't see any.
No hands.
I've got, so. Just one quick comment on the total number of complaints for animals. That's all animals. I see a high number in area C, and I do know there were a lot of livestock issues in the last little while. So I just wanted to make that clear too, that we're not just focusing on wrecks, so to speak. Thank you, sir. Well, that was for information, so there's no motion required. So if there's no more questions, we'll move along to item C. Dog control amendment bylaw. Director Newell, please.
Director.
Thanks for that promotion.
You get the motion there, Mr. Newell. Well, I'll try not to do that to you again.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So back in the last term, in October, when we were talking about the consolidation of the noise bylaw and moving to decimeter, a more robust monitoring system rather than how we'd been doing it before, we talked then about taking the barking dog issue away from noise and putting it into the dog bylaw. And as normal, it took us a few months, especially with the election period, to get that up. So it appeared on the board on November 17th for discussion and then referred back to committee to have further discussion on how we were going to do this noise part of it and who was in, who was out, that sort of thing. So this was a referral from the board last meeting to this meeting. And we'll turn this over to Mr. Petrie. I'm not sure. Do you have another presentation or just questions? Yeah, so it's really about where the board wants to go with the bylaw and then the bylaw enforcement notice bylaw, where the fines go. Mr. Chair, that's what we need direction on.
All right, thank you, Mr. Newell. Mr. Petrie, we'll see if there's any questions for you. You don't have a presentation on that?
No, I don't. I was just hoping to lead a bit of a discussion to explain some of the background on it and explain what we're really doing here. There was some confusion, I believe, at the last board meeting.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Any people with comments for Mr. Petrie, please? I am not seeing. Oh,
Director Gettins.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to move the administrative recommendation, please.
Any seconder? Director Monteith? Any further discussion? Director Roberts?
I believe this would be the time, Director Knodel, I believe, if you were wanting to join in, because accepting this has it at this point in time, just leaving out B and G, just looking for process moving forward. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And to that point, Mr. Petrie, I would like to include Area C in the referral. I'm not sure what I do to accomplish that, CO Newell.
So if you could make a motion, Mr. Chair, to remove Area C out of, as far as barking dogs, out of the noise, out of the dog bylaw, that would give us the direction to propose an amendment when we go back to the board on the 15th.
Thank you, sir. I would so move that. Seconded by Director Roberts. I'd like to include in that motion that I'd like data gathered in the time, and I'd review it again in a year. Director Coyne, please.
I thought we already had a motion on the table. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we handle that. Mr. Knoll, sir.
Yeah, we'll just take your motion as an amendment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Oh, there was.
Yes.
Director Roberts. Any discussion on the amendment? All right. Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, amendment carries. Back to the discussion on the main. Any more discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to item G, Electoral Area Planning Commission for information only. Gary O'Neill, I try not to demote you again.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we've had a couple of rounds on this one so far. This is with regards to the resources available for staff to attend at the advisory planning commissions, and we wanted to do it early before the planning commissions were appointed. So we're still in that discussion. Mr. Garish has another slide deck that he wants to go through. We'll see if he's got puppies in here.
Thank you very much. Mr. Garish, please.
Great, thank you. And unfortunately, no puppies. So I just want to spend a few slides here just doing a quick recap for the board. So first one just deals with legislation and some of our past history. So, you know, the Act does provide the board with some flexibility in terms of how it chooses to establish its APCs for the electoral areas or the regional district, as the case may be. And as the board is aware from the last discussion, we have historically maintained about 7 APCs for each of the electoral areas. In the last term, there were 77 members in total, so quite a number. And the APCs have historically been meeting once a month on an as-needed basis, with their meetings spread out throughout the course of a month. So sometimes that can result in no meetings, or on a rare occasion, which I'll have some charts coming up, shows about once a year. The last 2 years, we've had that kind of occurrence. And again, historically, the APCs were always in person, but with COVID-19, we did move to the online version. And then more recently, before staff withdrawal of support, it was the hybrid. So also just, you know, more background context. So in terms of workload, there has been a significant increase in development applications since 2015. A significant list of strategic planning projects. We're also in a competitive job market for land use planners, which has resulted in staff turnover and also significant overtime hours. And what we've heard, obviously there's a number of factors that go into people making decisions to leave the organization, but one of them is the citing of the night meetings, and that being a push factor. So again, just to recap some more, the implications for staff attendance at APC. There is the travel time commitments, especially if we're doing in-person. Recognition that planning applications are more complex. Challenges we've had with making sure that APCs meet quorum, and the implications for staff as well as applicants who've attended or traveled to attend these meetings. The uncertainty around the format of the APC meetings, and if they are in person and online, and the staffing requirements to support that. And then just some of the challenges that we had over the last year with the commissions, and, you know, also the recognition that, you know, retaining commission members is also becoming an issue, that we have had high turnover recently. Sorry, yeah, I'm still in the recap stage here. So again, just a reminder, some of the changes that we did implement. Ceasing staff attendance at APCs was only one of a suite of changes that we made to try to address the overtime issues and staff retention. And as you can see, that we had originally projected earlier this year that we would be looking at about 1,100 hours of overtime. But with those changes that we made in June, we are now on track to only put in about 800, which is still a lot and not really sustainable, but we're hopeful that we can get that down with some of the other changes we're proposing here. So again, the options that were before the board on November 17th, there was three main ones, which I'll touch on individually here. So restructuring the APCs, the proposal that you considered was one for each of the valleys, Okanagan and Similkameen. It meet once a month. It would be during the day. And if that occurred, we would be able to offer the option of in-person and hybrid and support that with available staff resources. And that would include being able to stream the meetings and put them on the YouTube channel for future reference and also for viewing by people who may not be able to attend in person. The second option that was before the committee was to not reappoint the APCs. As was pointed out last meeting, the APCs ceased to exist with the beginning of the new board term, so there are currently no APCs. And so in effect, you could argue this is now the status quo position. I appreciate that there might be some uncertainty around this option, so certainly the option to trial it for a year or two is available to the board to see how that goes. And the third option was to reestablish the previous APC model, which would have each of the electoral areas with their own APC meeting at night and supported by staff. But we felt with the existing workload and also in recognition of the overtime and staff turnover that's been occurring, that kind of a model would require additional staff resources. And so we had a recommendation that an additional planner be provided if this was the model that the board wanted to go with. So in considering those, the board asked that further options be brought forward for consideration. I think some of the points that were raised in the discussion involved retaining individual electoral area APCs, the online meeting option, keeping the APCs as a night meeting, and also exploring the options around scheduling them once a month, all on the same day. So did some brainstorming, tallied some numbers to try to see how this might work. And as you can see here, on an average basis, we're probably looking at about 4 meetings a month. And if that was to occur on one night, we would have to do 2 and 2, as in 2 APCs starting, say, at 5 o'clock if we're looking at doing night meetings, and 2 starting at 6. But because of that number, we'd still be looking at bringing in about 3 to 4 staff into the office. But if it is an online only option, then that certainly reduces the travel time and makes situations where quorum may not be achieved a little bit more manageable. But there are potential challenges, particularly when we have some of those meeting months where we're looking at 5, 6, or 7 meetings having to be scheduled. And trying to accommodate that within a 5 to 7 p.m. time block would certainly present a logistical challenge for us. And sorry, I appreciate this graph is a little bit busy, but it just shows the frequency of meetings. I was hoping that there would be a trend here over the years, but there isn't, at least as far as I can see. So we did some brainstorming to try to come up with some other options for the board to consider. And so I've put this down as an option 4. And I mean, obviously from staff's perspective, the recommendation that we put to you at the previous meeting would still be our preference. But if the board is looking for other options, I suppose as a second best option from staff would be option 4, which would be the APC for each electoral area. But we do try to look at scheduling it once a month and have it online only. But in order to accommodate those months where we're potentially looking at, more than the 4, or, even 4 could present challenges too, depending on the number of items on the agenda, that there's flexibility provided in terms of the meet times. And so that if there are electoral areas that are able to meet during the day, that we can start those at after lunch at 1 p.m. And for those that can only meet at night, that we would then, look at scheduling those into the evening between 5 and 6 p.m., hopefully ending by 7 p.m. And again, to help with that management of the workload and the potential volume of APCs in any particular month, that the board might want to consider what items it actually is sending to the APCs for comments. I touched on this in a bit more detail in the staff report, but basically the gist of it is that items be restricted to zoning bylaw amendments and OCP amendments, and that permits no longer get referred to APCs. This didn't appear in your alternatives in the staff report, but it's kind of a variation on the recommendation from the previous meeting, and it would require more work in terms of exploring options here. But just returning to that concept of a single APC for the RD, we could certainly look at options around that, including expanding the number of members per electoral area. Of course, the flip side, which I tried to highlight here, is that you would have a very, very large potential commission with upwards of 30 members if that was a model that was pursued. So there could certainly be challenges around trying to manage that group. And I would strongly recommend that we look at setting quorum at something less than 50%. And even if there's concerns around, who's voting on what from which electoral areas on that type of a commission, I mean, I can't make any promises here in terms of what we could do in terms of voting structures, but we could certainly look into that and come back with some more options for the board on that. And the last option in the report, and again, it's kind of a return to the status quo that existed between June and October. So it's the traditional model. Each electoral area has its own APC. They meet at night throughout the course of a month. So there might be some weeks where there's 3 different APCs meeting on different days. They're all in person now, but staff do not attend. And that's just understood and accepted. And there's no additional staff resources provided. So those are the options. Obviously there's variations on those that could be considered by the board. And I'm certainly open to try to answer any questions that you may have. And yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Garish. At risk of being in the second place this time, I'm going to bring up a couple of things. Firstly, I've found that it's not necessary to have staff. So would it be possible to do a hybrid type? It's in a farming area. We also need people who work in the farming industry. So they're not available generally for afternoon meetings. So I definitely, for my area, I'd like to stay with the evening meetings, but I don't really see a need for staff. The panels are still an advisory position unless something is very contentious. As an example, some of the things that have gone on in Area E, large subdivisions, the need for staff is very limited. Would we be able to hybrid meetings tailored to each area's needs?
Well, it's certainly an option, but if it's a model in which there's no staff attendance and the desire is to have the online, then I suspect it would be a matter of having your APC members trained up in, I'm assuming WebEx, and having access to an accountant and also having access to the appropriate equipment and internet connection to be able to facilitate that if it's occurring. I suppose in Area C's situation at the community center. So I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not aware of if we have that capability at all the APC sites to do that, and what would be exactly involved in training up your APCs to facilitate those online options.
Would we need the online option, sir?
Well, that would wholly be up to the board. I mean, it would certainly facilitate participation by some of your members in more remote locations, but if they're all committed to coming in person, then no, you wouldn't need them.
It's been a minor issue at this point, but it's something we could work on in the future. All right, I've taken up enough of your time. Are there any other questions from the board, please? Director Roberts, please.
Thank you to the chair. And again, I'm aware I'm speaking from the perspective of in the Similkameen, and with my new found OCP coming forward, I believe it's going to be quite easy on our side of the mountain in regards to facilitating daytime meetings. I'm open for that. I don't think it's an issue. I can move around within the day and find, and if you find people that are really committed to it, we make adjustments in our lives. On top of that, if I do it during the days, I know that at our rec center, we do have the smart board and staff that can probably help me there. And so, we see that doing the hybrid in the Similkameen as it stands, because a lot of places don't have good internet coverage. So I would have people coming into an area, but other ones calling in. So I'm good with the having it hybrid, having it at a location set at the rec center in Karamias. And at the same time, I'm feeling that, that way we can have then staff coming in via the smart board.
Very good. Is there a rebuttal to that, Mr. Garish? No.
No comment.
Director Gettens, please.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to just make a statement first that because we don't have APCs in process right now, we do have citizens that are waiting for us to make a decision on this and get moving because we're not moving applications forward until we get this done. So once we make this decision, we then have to go and find the volunteers and get them appointed. So we still got some work to do once we get going through this conversation. With that, I did send it over to my pre-existing APC, and they have indicated that option one is their preference, and that they can make those hours work. They understand the challenges with staff, but they're willing to give it a try. Like you said, we can do a test or a pilot for a year and give it a shot. The only concern that I have as a director with an area, and I think all of our areas have so many different parts to them, but to know what Falder and Meadow Valley is like and you live in Greater West Bench is really a challenge. And so having only 2 members is a struggle, and I have a hard time getting that one. So I would like to suggest maybe even 3 members so we can try and get a member from each location, and then go forward with your option number 1. But I would like to try and make a decision today so we can get going on finding our APC volunteers.
Mr. Garish, are those options possible?
Yes.
Good. Any other questions? Director Roberts.
I'm wondering whether or not that was a motion from Director Gettens, and if so, I could second it.
I'll make the motion. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry about that. I'll move option number 1, if we can just amend it to 3 members per area.
Seconded by Director Roberts. Director Monteith, I see your hand up.
Through the chair, I absolutely cannot support option number 1. My area has so many different sections, and I purposely made sure that my APC had representation from every area. For me to have one person represent Apex, Cleedon, Twin Lakes, St. Andrews, Marin Valley, Farley Lake, like it's impossible. Like I need 5, and then at least double, because you want more than one perspective at the table. So I'd need 10 to be fair. On my APC, I have 8 people, and they very fairly represent the entire area. I can't have 1 or 2 or 3 represent everybody. It's not a fair representation, and it's not what the APC would not be able to provide adequate information to me to make board decisions when we get to this level. So I can't support option 1. And I think that that's really going down a really bad path, and it's going to break public trust because they want to be involved. And that's why we have an APC, is to advise us. So option number 1 is not an option.
Thank you, Director Monteith. Director Gettens, I see your hand up again.
Thanks. I want to just acknowledge what Director Monteith is saying there, and I get it. I absolutely do get it. But we're at a standstill with staff. We don't have another planner to support larger APCs. That's what we're hearing. And they are an advisory committee. So you're part of the role of attending these meetings is just to take that advice. It's not a directive to the board. So if it doesn't come from a fair group of people, then that decision comes to this table. But I hear what you're saying, but we need to try something. We need to be able to move further on.
Thank you. Director Taylor had his hand up.
Yeah, just bit of caution about thinking of a community group with upwards of 20 to 30 members on it. And who would be managing that? And the different voting structure that you're contemplating. I really wonder if our community members would understand how that works, So that is a concern for me at the moment, because I think we'd have to define that before we could start making any decisions. And I agree with your comment about decisions and a stack of things coming.
Thank you, Director Taylor. Director Monteith, and then Director Roberts, please.
Through the chair, I would go to no staff attendance versus a amalgamated APC. The North Okanagan Regional District, they have moved to a one central APC, and they have actually postponed it because they can't get volunteers. I spoke to one rural director that was reelected, and the feedback from the APC was they saw no value in going to meetings where there was things not on the agenda that had nothing to do with their area. So the attendance actually decreased, and the value from the APC just wasn't there. So they're struggling with what we're considering. So we have an active system. We have great volunteers. I have a full APC that wants to be involved. I would go to no staff versus amalgamating.
Thank you, Director Monteith. Director Roberts, please.
Thank you to the chair. So my question would be, could we do a hybrid in so much that we have, let's say, we have our own without staff. You've got, for instance, like Director Monteith says, her full contingent kind of talking on issues. And then when you have the staff meeting that is held, in so many times a month, et cetera, as a whole, those issues, desires, and values of the body is then taken by the members, the 3 members that go up to the group session that is then managed by staff.
Thank you. The director from Area E, I believe it was, and I'm sorry, Adrian, I can't remember your last name.
Federico.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've also reached out to my standing APC. I'll say they're kind of lurking right now, and they're okay with the no staff at meetings as well. I think if they have questions about anything that's come forward, they'll reach out to staff to ask. Living in an area with some highly contentious things, I think if something was to come across where we needed staff, then we would reach out. But yeah, they're happy with no staff.
Thank you, Director. Any other questions? I also support it. Oh, Director.
Yeah, so I have a question then, because I thought the whole reason why we were looking at this is because we really valued staff at the APCs. So if that is the case, how does that work for the staff load? So if you send everything out to existing APC, is there a timeline or a set period of time where the APC can then get back to you with the questions? Do you share the answers to those questions with everybody involved? Like how would that work on your end? Or how did it work previously?
Mr. Garish, sir.
Great, thank you. Well, so when we withdrew staff in June, we offered to the APCs that we would still be available to them, and that ideally, from our perspective, that they would get any questions they had to us at least 48 hours before the APC meeting so that we had time to provide a response. And ideally, we tried to encourage the APC members to funnel their questions up through the chair so the chair could weed out repetitious or, the same question being asked by multiple members. We didn't have much success with that, but we also didn't honestly get that many questions from the APC members, but we did make ourselves available and we would continue to do so if there was no staff being required to attend. So it's just, yeah, ideally, so we can have time to respond, it would be 48 hours beforehand, but I know that's not always possible, so.
Thank you. Any other questions from the panel? I myself support Director Monteith's suggestion of going with no representation from the board. It would be very difficult to do an overall, and I think it would be just an absolute logistical nightmare. Director Taylor, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this because it's not direct to the motion, but I'd be looking for, I personally would be looking for availability of staff as my ideal. And I would be looking for your recommendation, option number 4, or some loose variant of it. So.
All right. Thank you, Director Taylor. Any other questions for Mr. Garish or comments, please? I'm not seeing anything from what I've got visible. We have a question on the floor. Shall we call the question? All in favor? I see one. All opposed? Motion fails. Is there another motion for the Director Monteith, please?
Alrighty, I would like to make the recommendation that APCs be reinstated with no staff in attendance, but I do want to make sure that variances are referred to APCs as well.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? I will second that. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this motion? Director Taylor, please.
Two, I guess. Is it possible, would we still have the option of having questions funneled to staff in advance and a response from staff to be addressed at the table?
Mr. Garrett, please.
Yes, we would still make staff available for that. And I don't mean, well, I'm going to jump in. It would be helpful, I think, for staff too, if, because as the board is aware, we do have some nights where we have multiple APCs meeting, and just for scheduling and purposes, if the board may be open to setting a schedule where we don't have multiple APCs happening on the same night, that might be helpful for us, if we can spread them out a little bit better over the course of a month.
Director Taylor, follow up?
Well, I'm confused that, I mean, I would like that because I think you're suggesting that you'd be available for the meetings, but I think the director's motion was that staff wouldn't be at the meetings.
Right. Mr. Garish?
Craig, sorry, I should have clarified. I was more thinking about agenda preparation and getting reports up to the APCs, and so to avoid those rushes where we're dealing with multiple in like 3 or 4 in 1 week, if we could spread that workload out a little bit.
Could I interject, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering if we can be somewhat flexible on this. The directors who are interested in having their APCs meet during normal business hours, I really don't see us having a problem providing staff support on those. And it's really the evening meetings that are causing the concerns as far as staff retention. So we might be able to work out some sort of a hybrid type of meeting structure here, depending on what the directors want to see. I saw some tolerance for some willing to meet during the day, some tolerance for some willing to proceed at night but not have staff support. I saw others that were interested in more of a broader type of committee, although 30 is too big, that would meet during the day. So maybe we can somehow synthesize this and see how we could accommodate particular directors' wishes.
Thank you, CAO Newell. I think that's very good advice. Director Roberts.
Thank you to the chair, and thank you, CAO, because that was the point I was going to make. I'm willing to work with staff during working hours, be flexible, and also because of where I'm at, most likely wouldn't be having monthly meetings. So yeah, I appreciate the flexibility.
Would you be willing to make an amendment to the motion to that effect? We'll move to seconder, please. I'll second. Any questions on the amendment? Director Monteith?
Through the chair, what is the amendment?
To basically allow each area to pick their poison, so to speak, on what we have available. Is there discussion? Director Roberts, please.
I believe that the motion is that basically if you're going to have evening meetings, it'd be without staff, and it would follow suit with the last motion. However, you have the flexibility, if you plan to work with staff during the day, that you have the ability to have staff at either a hybrid or at a area meeting, as long as it's done within work hours and meets the needs that all can deal with in regards to their own flexibility. That's how I read it, if that was
Thank
correct.
you for the clarity and wording, please. Sir, are there any other questions? Comments? Director Monteith, are you happy with that? Yeah. All in favor of the amendment? Amendment carries. Now on the main motion. Any other comments? No? Very good. We'll call the question on the main motion. And that was to carry forward with unsubstantiated or unsupported, yeah, thanks. Unsupported membership for meetings. I guess that would be option. Oh, I lost the page here. Director Monteith, would you clarify your motion, please? I'm trying to find the page.
Thanks to the chair. I think everyone in the room is on the same page. So it's APC meetings as set by schedule and no staff in attendance, but available during business hours.
For each area, yeah, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that was an ordeal. My apologies, folks. Next item up, temporary use permits, renewal and reissuance, delegated authority, please, CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So Mr. Garish has found another section of the Local Government Act that allows for further delegation to staff, and this one specifically on the temporary use permit. So we can turn this over to him for presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett, please.
Great, thank you. And I'll try to go quick because I see the time here. So further to what the CAO was just saying, there is a section of the Act in relation to temporary use permits that does allow for local government to delegate to staff the power to issue a permit. So obviously that's interesting because it's not refuse, which is a delegated authority for DVPs, but not for TUPs. And just another formality, when the board or a local government delegates such power, an owner who's subject to such a decision is entitled to have the board reconsider that. So that's kind of the administrative framework. It's very simple compared to what the legislature did in relation to delegated DVPs. So there's some flexibility here. And just some more background context for the board. So our history with TUPs was we weren't issuing very many up until about 2014. I think one or two a year would have been a high year. The province changed legislation in 2013. Prior to that, TUPs could only be considered for basically commercial and industrial zones. And that was very beneficial to us, especially in the context of the Leach case that we had lost in relation to vacation rentals and the strategic direction that we were going with how to deal with vacation rentals and regulating those through TUPs. That legislative change allowed us to then use this permit process for vacation rentals. So we updated our OCPs again in 2014. And as a result of that change, our processing and receipt of these TUP applications increased significantly. I should point out there's actually a typo in the report, and that's a mistake. It was 129 TUP applications since 2014. I think the report said 149. And of those, as the board is aware, the vast majority are vacation rentals. And this is one of those years where we have a whole bunch of them expiring. And I think we sent out 24 letters in September for permits that were due to expire by the end of the year, which caused some concerns in terms of how we were going to process all these requests if they came in at once versus some of the other priorities that we had from the board, and also dealing with other land use applications that were coming in. And this just goes a chart that goes to show how we've been receiving these applications since the vacation rental changes came in. It seems to be getting higher each year. So given that, we are looking for efficiencies, and we do feel that there is a benefit to delegation, and we're not asking the board to give us full delegation, obviously. We just feel that there's a benefit to dealing with the renewals and reissuances. And just to clarify, so a reissuance, like a TUP under the Act, can only be issued once and renewed once. But, you know, as the board is aware, we've chosen to use TUPs to regulate vacation rentals on an ongoing basis. So after that first permit issue and renewal, we informally refer to them as reissuances. So we're only asking the board for delegation for renewals and reissuances on non-controversial ones. We know that the board has previously made changes to, stop these renewals and reissuances going to APCs. And that was actually at the request of a number of APCs who I think felt there wasn't much benefit to their seeing these. And again, one of the changes that we made back in June because of staff turnover and overtime levels was not sending renewals and reissuances to the PIMs prior to board consideration. So we feel delegation is kind of akin to those other two previous steps, and would certainly help expedite the processing of non-controversial applications. If the board is supportive of this, we're proposing that, it is only limited to reissuance, not non-controversial. What do we mean by that? Well, obviously that no representations have come in opposing the reissuance of the TUP, that there's been no compliance issues during the term of the TUP, and that basically the applicant is not making any changes. So it's nothing that the board hasn't seen before if they're going to delegate the authority to staff. And so if the permit meets all those criteria, that staff would then have the ability to issue it without having to prepare the staff report and schedule it to a board meeting, et cetera. And so if I seem to have died. Anyway, there's only 2 slides left. So in terms of changes that would be required, if the board is supportive of this, we would bring back amendment bylaws for the CAO delegation bylaw, and then we would also have to make some minor changes to our processing procedures for TUPs, but those changes would not affect our basic current notification processes, which would be still requiring an applicant to put up a site notice, letting adjacent owners and residents know within a 100-meter radius, putting it out on Voyant, and also making the information available on the regional district's webpage so that we can elicit any comments or concerns from neighbors that might impact whether a permit's issued under delegation or not. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gary. It's warming to know that you stumble also. I don't feel so alone now. Any questions for Mr. Garish? Director Gettins, please.
Thanks to the chair. When you say email subscription through Voyant, does that mean just specific to emails? You're not going to do it to text messaging or landlines?
Mr. Garish, please.
No, but sorry, it was just a reference to how I think of Voyant, but yeah, it would be those other options as well.
Okay, thanks. And just as a quick follow-up, Chair, and then what is the schedule for Voyant alerts for planning?
Mr. Garish?
Oh, thank you. I believe it's generally the same radius that we use for sending out the written letters through Canada Post, which is 100 meters for TUP. So we would try to capture anybody within 100 meters of that property who signed up to receive the land use notifications through Voyant.
Can I just do one more follow-up, Chair, please?
Yes, Director Gettins.
Thanks. So the concern that I have about the 100-meter radius, and I'm just going to use Greater Westminster as an example, and we had a lot of pushback around the large garages and such, and because it's changing the feel of the whole neighborhood and not just the 100 meters. Can we use Voyant for that community larger than just the 100 meters? Because I think there's a lot of people that would like to have that input, not just the neighbors. It might be okay with the neighbors, but we also know sometimes neighbor relationships can also be a little bit challenging or delicate. So if we can just do the community, because some of these decisions impact the community as a whole. So that would be, I'm on board with this, but I just would like to make sure that we are notifying more citizens of the decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Garish, please.
Sure, thank you. So when I make references to 100 meters, the way the procedures bylaw is written, I understand or recall, is that it's a moving radius, but it cannot be less than 100 meters. So usually that allows us flexibility when we're dealing in rural areas where 100 meters doesn't capture very many people at all. But to be honest, in situations like West Bench or OK Falls or Naramata Town Site, we usually do just stick to the 100 meters, but we do have that flexibility to increase it.
Thank you. Director Taylor, please. and then Director Monteith.
Yeah, just on the 100-meter thing, I think our complex is almost 100 meters long. So I personally would like to see something more than 100 meters as part of the policy, not just left up to staff to decide. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Garish.
I can certainly bring back options with the amendment bylaw for the board to consider.
Thank you, sir. Director Monteith, please.
Through the chair, I guess I'm looking for some feedback from my fellow directors. With the change with the CAO delegation, has anybody had a variance approved in their area? And what was the feedback on that? I'll give an example that happened in my area where there was a variance was approved as a minor variance that appears very minor. But there was, so the process was that the application goes up, letters go out to the neighbors, they're notified. My residents were waiting for a board report to appear and sort of like a staff recommendation because they lean on staff to, bring the bylaws forward and explain what makes sense and whether it would be supported or not. Then a notification goes up that it's been approved and then a board report goes up. So for my community, they were quite upset with the delegation because they were waiting for that feedback, that board report. So I guess I'm wanting to make sure that if we are delegating this authority to make decisions on our behalf, that there is a process that's in place that residents have that opportunity to give feedback once they have a staff perspective. Because residents need that. They need to know, they can't just go and say, I don't want this garage, it's too high. Right? They need to understand that, it's only half a meter higher or, the variance isn't that significant and that's why it's considered a minor variance. So looking for some feedback on the process from my board mates and see if you have any other experience. Thanks.
I do have just want to clarify something with you, Director Monteith. Was that that wouldn't have been on a reissuance, then that would have been on a primary, would it not? Okay, so I'm not sure that really fits this, but Mr. Garish, would you care to comment on that, please? I don't think it fits the situation, so.
Well, I'm only hesitant to comment because I thought the director asked for comment from her fellow directors. So I might just take a pass on this one. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's I'm not sure that's really fits in this particular one because it's to allow for renewals and reissuances. So we might have to look at that from a different point. Director Monteith, please.
Through the chair, if we're bringing the delegation bylaw back, this would be an opportunity to do those changes as well. So I was looking at combining the opportunity.
Is there a motion in that? No. All right. We'll take that under advisement. Is there any other comments from directors? Director Roberts, please.
Thank you to the chair. And it's a question for Mr. Garish. Since there's been some concern in regards to the 100 meters, is it possible to tie it to resident properties? So for instance, if you're in a smaller residential area where it's more condensed, it's taking in a number, which takes in the appropriate amount versus small holdings, large holdings, it just expands out in relationship to how many the neighbors. So if you went with a number of the residents, residential properties versus an actual measured amount of space.
Mr. Garish.
I would have to get back to the board on that. I'm just trying to think what the legislation requires in terms of our notification requirements and if it speaks to radius. And if it does, then we would have to be looking at a radius as opposed to a density of dwellings or density of properties or et cetera. So.
Thank you, Mr. Garish. Any other questions for Mr. Garish? Is there anyone who cares to make the motion? Director Pendergraft, is there a seconder? I'll second the motion. All right. Any questions on the motion now? Seeing Director Roberts?
So you could just read out the motion again, please. Thanks.
that the Regional District of Okanagan, Similkameen Chief Administrative Officer Delegation Bylaw number 2793, 2018, and Development Procedures Bylaw number 2500, 2011 be amended to allow for the Delegated Temporary Use Permit, TUP, renewals and reissuances. Any questions as to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries, and we'll make a recommendation to staff to take a look at the delegation bylaw in the future. Thank you. With that, I'm up to adjournment. So looking for a motion to adjourn. Director Roberts, seconder. I'll second. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Chair Pendergrass.
Thank you, Director Knodel. We will jump straight into the Corporate Services Committee meeting. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. First item up is we're looking for a letter of support from for Rogers Shaw Communications in application for a Connecting Communities grant. And I think we need to go in camera for this. Do we have Rogers Shaw online?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, they are there. The rationale for going in camera is CAO. Can you explain that?
We're using sub J of section 90 of the charter, Mr. Chair. It's for proprietary information held by a private company. So we have two delegates that want to make a presentation to committee.
Okay, looking for a motion to go in camera. Moved, thank you. Seconded, perfect. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll give Danny a half a second to get us prepped. We're on order but haven't shown up yet. Coming one at a time or two at a time, Danny told me this morning. So the rest are coming eventually. We're okay now to go? Thumbs up. That brings us to item C, decision-making policy. And this one's for information. CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we had the interesting workshop with Gord McIntosh last week. What's black, white, and gray all over. And one of the issues that he talked about in that was a decision-making process and model that he was promoting. And we have adopted a policy and a model back in 2009 that really reflected what Mr. McIntosh had been developing. And I thought it would be opportune, but we, of course, tinker with it. So I thought it would be opportune to put this on the agenda and have the a discussion on how we make decisions in our organization, how we get an issue from point of entry to point of decision, where that can be done, and how it flows. And then if this 22 to 2026 board wants to make some changes to that, we can have that discussion and amend it accordingly. So Danny's going to pull up the policy for us. This is in your eScribe folder as well. But generally, this is how we flow information. So what I wanted to show is, and typically what we would do is we follow that model of committee of the whole, but we break ours into 5 different sections. Each of our select committees has a terms of reference, and we like to flow any more or less complex issues through committee first. It gives the board an opportunity to first discuss it, looking at it from the perspective of what's the staff perspective, and we give you that in our administrative report. It offers the opportunity for the public to see it. It offers the opportunity for other, where we have delegates that want to speak to a certain issue, and it gives you a chance to give your political perspective in an informal session, and it allows us longer to do it. Everybody's aware we try and curtail discussions. We feel by the time that an issue gets onto a board agenda, that you have enough information about the issue to discuss it amongst yourselves and make a decision. And I'm going to show you what happens when that doesn't occur. But that is the intent of our decision-making policy and model. So a lot of our stuff is day-to-day administrative type of work. It would be something that's either recurring or it's application-based, where a citizen will come in, make an application for a permit. Most of our planning issues are like that. Any sort of bylaw enforcement, moving that on to litigation. They all come in through application and just through the day-to-day work of our administration. If there is something that a member wants to get into the decision-making process, you have many opportunities in different places for that. You can either bring it up right at committee. You can bring it up at the board. You can just give it to a staff member and ask for a report to be brought forward. There's different things that happen with each of those. If it comes up at committee or the board, we really prefer that the receiving group, whether it's committee or the board, refer that back to us if it is complex at all, so that we can do the administrative report. Our whole intent out of this is to do the research on it. We'll try and be as objective as possible, looking at what's the issue, rely on anything we can in order to provide good information. So whether there's legislation or regulation, policy, bylaw, precedent, whatever it is, we'll refer to that and advise you of it so that you have that in your toolkit when you make a decision. We do a bit of a history on the issue. If there's a past, we'll advise you of all of that. We look at the options for resolution. We'll analyze each of those, and we'll give you our administrative recommendation. That's what you pay us to do. And then we'll bring that forward to you in committee, let you have a whack at it, and then you can send that forward or not, or amend it, do whatever you want. In our system, committees are meant to be less formal. Yes, we address them in our procedure bylaw. There's a set of rules around what we can do. But as far as decisions go, you have much more flexibility at a committee than you would at a board. So you can certainly bring them up in those forums, and you can, if you feel you have enough information, if it's at a board meeting, in order to go ahead and discuss it amongst yourselves and make a decision, that's certainly within your purview as well. What we don't want you to do is to expect staff to be able to address questions or concerns if we don't know about an issue in advance. So we, just like you, we're averse to surprises. So you need to give us notice about that, and then give us time in order to do our research, in order to get that up to you so you can make an informed decision. So if it's just an administrative issue that we're bringing forward, we'll just do that automatically. We'll do our research, we'll do our administrative reports, and we'll bring it forward. And I'll show you how that flows through our system as well. Because in the end, what we want you to have is a holistic view, everything that you need in order to make a good decision. And we know that even though we have 9 departments and each one has sort of a function chart of what they're responsible for, that they're all interdependent. Nothing they do is just solely a responsibility of one department. there's always going to be financial issues or legal issues or technical issues. And you need all of that information in the report prior to us making our recommendation. So that is important as well. So once we get an issue, the administrative part of it begins, and we'll do our research and our report. We'll make sure that it goes up through what we call our senior management team. It's where all of our 9 managers get together and we talk about everything that's going to go on to a committee or a board agenda, just making sure that all the components of it are included, that everything's been considered so that we provide good information. And then we'll put that usually on a committee first. And then committee can decide what they want to do with it. You can either send it up to the board, you can send it back to administration if you have further questions, or you can just decide not to deal with it. Either way, it's fine. So once it is at that stage, we get it onto the board agenda, then the board also has some options as to what they can do with it. Now, if it's a go, then you just make your resolution and we'll put it onto your board action tracker. And we've just made a note to ourselves. We're going to bring the board action tracker on a regular basis so that you know where those items that are still in progress reside. A lot of them are legal or they depend on some other organization or agency and take a long time. Some of them years. And they just sit on the board action tracker and we keep working on them. Probably our oldest one right now was a property on Green Mountain Road that was that slipped during the, I think it was the 2018 floods and is no longer occupiable. So we're waiting for the property owners to determine whether they want to do a geotechnical report or what's the possibility on that. There is a residence on it. So we try and keep the outstanding issues on the board action tracker as short as possible. The managers are always going in and updating it. And we're going to make that available to you on the board member intranet as well, so that you can go in there and check that at any time. But we don't lose them, is the point of that. They're always resolutions, bylaws, direction that comes formally is always on the board action tracker. If an issue gets to the board and you don't have enough information to make a decision, or new information has come up, or you want further time to consider it, you have always that option to refer it. You can table it and just leave it sitting on the table until you want to bring it back for discussion. If you want more information, you can either send it back to a committee like you did with the dog bylaw, or you can send it back to staff to do further research. Always at that time, we appreciate any direction you might be able to give us as to really what you're looking for. Or otherwise, we can just place it back on committee. But you have that opportunity at that point to decide if you have the information necessary to make an informed decision. And the reason I keep saying informed decision is Mr. McIntosh also went through that informed decision-making spectrum. So on the one hand, if you're sort of a sole proprietor of a business, you can, or a dictator, you can make decisions by yourself, and that's often the easiest way to do it. Unfortunately, in our system, that's not a possibility. The other end of that is consensus, and while consensus is great, we often don't have the time in order to wait until we can convince everybody to vote the same way. So it's a matter of providing the opportunity for good debate and discussion, making sure we have all the information. Everybody gets to have their say, and you get to try and convince your colleagues that your opinion should be the way we move forward. And in the end, we have a vote. And of course, we have a very complex voting structure. But for most of it, at committee, you all play, you all get one vote, and we go by simple majority. So that then is the informed decision-making process. Every member's had the opportunity to express their point of view. Once it's in the possession of a committee or board, it stays with the committee or board, and only they can decide what to do with it. And if it is to move forward, we would hope that even those that vote against it believe that they've had the opportunity to express their opinion and can then support the decision of the group once it gets to that point. So that's the informed decision-making spectrum. So, and I mean, the other thing that you have the capability of doing is you can form a task force at any time. If there's an issue that you think really needs a lot of consultation or to go back out to the public, you can always set up a task force in order to further explore that. So that really, I think, capsulizes what I thought the committee might be interested in, Mr. Chair. And if there are any suggestions or questions or comments about the decision-making policy or the model, I'd certainly be happy to try and address them.
Yeah, just in the policy, it says that all items requiring a board decision should go to a committee first unless it's important and urgent, basically. But what about things like development matters, routine? I mean, those are board decisions and they don't go to committee. And so shouldn't we be more specific on what needs to go to committee and what doesn't?
Go ahead, CAO.
Yeah, I put two colored boxes on there. So the generic type of decision-making model that Mr. McIntosh spoke about, he didn't address the ad hoc bodies. So sometimes, especially with us, we have this system of advisory planning commissions. Most of our complex planning issues will go through a planning commission first, and then they'll come directly to the board. We always refer, if an issue is being to an advisory planning commission, it's always referred to in the administrative report. The other thing is we have this other system with planning issues. We call them public information meetings. In our procedure bylaw, that's up to the developer or the applicant, if it's a complex issue, to hold a public meeting prior to it coming up to the board, and we always get comments on that. And then certainly anything to do with an OCP or a zoning amendment has a regulatory requirement for public hearings, and they'll go through that process. So most of if they aren't coming through a select committee, it's because they've gone to an ad hoc body that the board has created.
Okay. Any follow-up on that, Director Holmes? Okay. Any other discussion? Director Wiebe?
To the chair, just a clarifier for some of us that are from the village or town council. My understanding for when we have committee in the hall or any of those types of things is that we don't make decisions. So I'm just clarifying with the committees here but we can make recommendations. Is that the correct? So we're not technically making a decision, but there is. The way it was explained to me was in committees for, village council, kind of to avoid any indication that you've already made a decision before you get to the decision-making process. So I'm just like to clarify what the recommendation means, because it would appear that might be a part of that decision-making process, and I just need to clarify, from my understanding, how this policy works.
Yeah. CAO?
All of our select committees are advisory, and all of our ad hoc committees are advisory as well. So we'll send administrative reports forward with, and I'll be clear, they usually just have the administrative perspective in them. Okay, it's that committee or an ad hoc body that the public or the political perspectives get added in. But once it goes to a committee, it's in the possession of that committee, and then they would be responsible for making a recommendation to the board for decision. It then leaves the administration control and goes into committee control.
Okay. Anything further? Seeing none, we will move on. The next item is the function chart of the regional district. I'm not sure there's a need for an explanation there, but I think it was requested by a director to have that available. But CAO, did you have anything you wanted to add on it, or?
No, that's exactly it, Mr. Chair. It came out of Budget Committee. Director Roberts had asked if we could bring it forward. So we put it on the agenda through eScribe. Certainly be happy to answer any questions or discuss it. We do have a delegate under Environment as our next committee, and we're probably out of time to have the intense discussion.
Sure. So if you have questions on that, offline, see the CAO or myself, and we can talk about it. But it's mostly just to give you an indication of who you want to talk to with certain issues. So, Mr. Director Miller?
A very quick question. What is the amount that has to come before the board on tendering?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we entrenched that into our purchasing and sales policy, and we just amended that. Did we do that with this group or the last group? Last group? Oh, you just missed it. So at this point, we can approve up to $150,000. Okay? But we set out very specifically the process that we have to go through. If it's purchase of a service, it's usually a request for proposal type of system. I think that might be less. And then if it's if the only variable is price, we do a tender and we can award up to 150. But it sets out limits at levels in the organization as to how much they can spend.
Okay, that might be an idea to just send that out to the board for review for the new members, just to see it, and then it would be available.
Yes, because I know it varies from organization to organization.
I think we tried to get close to what everybody else was doing, but we'll get it sent out. I think it'd be a great idea. Motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Perfect. We are adjourned. I don't think there's anybody opposed, so we really don't have much time. I would just say, if you absolutely need to fill a coffee, do that in between here. But I'm going to turn it over to Director Gettens for the next committee meeting. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair. If I can just call the meeting to order. It's about 11 a.m. on the dot. And if get a motion to adopt the agenda, first and second, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Excellent. So we have one item on the agenda today, and that's a delegate from the South Okanagan Conservation Fund, Laura Meads, but I'm going to refer this over to you, CAO, for introductions, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So we have a sub-regional program that's called the Environmental Conservation Program. It was established a few years ago now, and what it does is allow the board to put up to $450,000 or a slight increase based on assessment away each year, and then we seek applicants who are interested in providing environmentally sound programs throughout the regional district. And that then goes to a technical committee, and they make recommendations to the board on how to allocate that. And we treat that as confidential because sometimes there is purchase of land involved and other matters that may get complicated if they're actually published before the implemented. So that's what we're about today, and that's why we're recommending that we go in camera under sub E of section 90 of the charter to receive that report.
Thank you. So do we need a motion to go in camera then? Can I get a motion, please? First and second, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, we'll just give Danny a few minutes to get us set up.
Okay.
Yeah, when you're asked to speak, you can just hit that
Okay.
button.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Yeah, it was a separate email.
Yeah.
Sometime.
So the discussion we're having is the email that everybody would have gotten with the information that we're going to hear today. That's separate from it because it's in camera.
It would have been Julian Crown
Yes.
sent it out?
Yeah, it
Perfect.
wasn't Chris, it was Jim. Yeah.
Okay. Just press that one to go forward. I think so, yeah.
Carissa sent the presentation yesterday. Jolene sent the reports to go along with this last Friday.
25th.
Thanks. Danny, are we ready to go? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I will just pass it over to you, Ms. Meads, for your presentation. Thank you.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren. I'm the new administrator for the South Okanagan Conservation Fund. And I know that some of you are new and some of you are old hat at this. So if you already support the fund, that's great. I just wanted to talk about why this is really important and it's really unique in this area. So we'll get started. There's a beautiful vista there. Okay, so why have a local conservation fund? So this is adding to our already lots of different kinds of funds that are around there, but this is specific for the local area. Protecting clean water sources, conserving natural areas for people to enjoy, restoring fish and wildlife habitat, and strengthening our community, caring for those ecosystems. And so working together at a local level. I don't know if you know, of course, probably as you guys all live here, is the South Okanagan Similkameen is a really unique area in Canada. It has the highest biodiversity in Canada. It's our only semi-arid desert. So this is a really sensitive ecosystem that we want to protect. Some of the guiding principles of the South Okanagan Conservation Fund is to act sooner. So trying to tackle our ecosystem issues before it becomes an issue, before things go extinct, before we're in a dire need. We are still at that point. We haven't quite ruined everything. So, and we want to act smarter. So we want to work with our local governments, local communities, and they know kind of best what needs to happen here. Acting together, again, that's acting together and investing more wisely. So using the money that we've
Okay, I'm getting the signal from Danny that we're online. We'll call the Regional District Okanagan Similkameen regular board meeting to order. We have a proposed agenda. Reminder that this is the opportunity to remove anything off the consent agenda, if there's a desire to do so. Seeing no hands, looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the consent agenda, corporate issues. Looking for a motion to adopt. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Perfect. Any opposed? That motion carries. Consent agenda, development services. Looking for a motion there. Moved, thank you. A seconder? Great. No discussion on these. All those in favor? Perfect. Any opposed? Thank you very much. That motion carries. Down to development services, rural land use matters. B1, petition to enter the fire service in electoral area H, CAO.
This is 579 Lawless Creek Road, Mr. Chair, just outside Tulameen. And this is a request to be added to the service area by petition, and the fire department is agreeable to that happening.
Okay, I'll go to the alternate director, Stringfellow. Thank you for attending today on behalf of Director Coyne. Go ahead.
I'd like to move the administrative recommendation.
Okay, you're moving it. Seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, this is a corporate vote. Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next one is B2, the Electoral Area G Official Community Plan, CAO.
Yeah, we're looking for a third reading as amended on this one, Mr. Chair, and I believe Mr. Garish may have a presentation just to bring the board up to date on what's occurred so far.
Okay, I will go to Mr. Garish. I see him coming up online. Go ahead. We're not hearing you, Chris. 1 second, he says, as he runs down the hall. No, he's got to be coming through the door any second. It was maybe closed on him. Okay, welcome, Mr. Garish. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry about that. And unfortunately, I've had to leave my slide deck in my office computer. So I'm just going to try to do this by memory. But I just had a few slides that were just giving a quick overview of the project, because I know it has been a long time since it was last before the board. And it was just basically a reminder of how we got to this point, which started with a Let's Talk, quote unquote, project that we commenced in 2019, just to gauge community interest in doing an official community plan for Area G, which of course there was. And that was subsequently translated into a budget being provided for an OCP project, which we undertook. I think it kicked off in 2020, but most of the work was done over 2021 and 2022. And that we had a draft prepared by the summer of this year, which came forward for first and second reading. And I believe that you have the public hearing report before you today, so you know that we did do the two public hearings in relation to this. And it was one of those situations where we were able to schedule the public hearing in different communities to try to engage with the public on the final draft of the bylaw. And we did receive a lot of comments back from the community, and there's some that we do want to make some adjustments to the plan to reflect. Two in particular, and I sorry, because I don't have my slide deck, I don't have the civic address in front of me, but there is the property just south of Karamias, in which we did receive feedback about future preferred land uses for that property, particularly the part that's outside of the ALR. And we are proposing that it be designated agriculture, but that there be a text statement saying that the board is open to alternate land use designations on a particularly residential, and depending on the proposed density of that residential, that be subject to the provision of, the typical services such as water and sewer. And then the other change that we're proposing is just a correction to some of the statements in relation to the Citizens Committee that was formed to help with the drafting of the OCP and their final contribution to the plan. So that would require the deletion of a section. And unfortunately, I don't have the section number in front of me at the moment, but I believe it's covered in your report. So that was basically what I wanted to highlight for the board. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that directors might have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from Mr. Garish on the Area G OCP? Go ahead, Director Roberts.
Thank you to the chair. And first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Garish and my team. So much ample collaboration and community involvement. We actually had 3 hearings, because we did do one in Headley and Karamias, and then we did a second hearing in Karamias as requested from the community in regards to the ending of the Karamias Creek fire, and they felt that that was too close, so we moved another one to September. In regards to a question, and I did leave one in there, maybe just a technical point in regards to the First Nations. USIP, I believe, is not a part of the ONA. It stated in this document that it was, and I'm not sure whether or not that is something that needs to be corrected.
Okay. I don't know that there is a need for a response on that. Any other questions from the group? Comments? Seeing none, I'll go to the area director on that. Do you have a motion you'd like to make, Director Roberts? Go ahead.
To the chair, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the as read and the amendments as placed forward by staff.
Okay, so you're moving the recommended motion there to give it third reading and add those amendments. A seconder, thank you. Any discussion on it? Director Roberts, go ahead.
Sorry that I'm speaking much, but this has been quite a long process. So again, as I stated before, really thanking the team and all the work that they've been involved. And I think it's important to know that even one of the things that was put in regards to representation from the official community plan, that there was a goal and a desire to have some easy reading material and therefores and whereases, and the team came up through a suggestion from Mr. Garish to have an accompanying document. And I would really appreciate the fact that we reached out, we listened to the community, and we came out with a compromise and an ability to be able to have another accessible document for people to understand the OCP and many of the clauses in it. It's been a long road, and I'm happy that we're at, and it has in great part to do with the team and all the work that they did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other discussion? I'm not seeing any. This is a corporate vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. It is a rural vote. You're probably right, but I think it does say corporate on here. No, it doesn't. My mistake. Rural vote then. Good catch. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to C, Community Services. C1, Emergency Radio Telecommunications, CAO.
We did an extensive review of our emergency telecommunications infrastructure back in 2010, Mr. Chair, and made significant improvements to it. It's been 12 years since then. It's time to do another review. There's been an evolution in technology as well as other demands as far as coverage going within that system. So we put together terms of reference for requests for proposals in conjunction with the 18 fire departments that participate in this service and that benefit from the infrastructure. And they have now made a recommendation to us, and we're bringing that forward to the board to award the contract for the telecommunications study to Planet Works Consulting for is that $85,967?
89, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. I didn't bring my glasses.
I have that same problem.
Yeah.
That does look like a 5 without the glasses. Okay, anybody prepared to move that? Mover, seconder, thank you. Discussion on it? Don't believe I'm seeing any hands. This one is a corporate vote for sure. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Any opposed? Motion carries. Apex Fire Hall, CAO.
So we did finally obtain tenure on a piece of property up in Apex for the Apex Fire Hall. And we are now ready to award the design and construction for that project to Johnston Davidson Architecture.
I think your mic is off, CAO, just for those online.
for $266,111.
Okay. Anybody prepared to move that? A mover? Thank you. Seconder? Great. Any discussion on this one? Go ahead, Director Monteith.
Through the chair, I'd like to thank staff for helping this project get to this point. I know Apex is very excited to have a fire hall, so yeah, big shout out to staff, thanks.
Thank you for that. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. Again, corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Brings us down to finance. Authorization for community works funds for Vermilion Forks. Oh, CAO. I read that wrong. From the Vermilion Forks Fund to the Eastgate Fire Protection. I'll get it right yet. I need my glasses too. CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So Director Coyne does want to make a grant of $14,830 to the Eastgate Fire Protection Society for a propane generator, Mr. Chair. And we need 3 readings and an adoption of that bylaw.
All right, thank you. Director Stringfellow.
Again, I'd like to make or move the administrative recommendation.
Okay, you're moving it. Seconded, thank you. It's on the floor. Any discussion about it? Not seeing any hands again. This is a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? No opposition. Motion carries. Down to legislative services. Electoral Area H Noise Control Bylaw, CAO.
Yeah, during our discussion about the noise control bylaw and doing that consolidation last October, it was determined that Area H wanted to be removed from the service. So we had that up to 3 readings, and now this is adoption to remove Area H. Sure.
Okay, thank you. Again, to Director Stringfellow.
I'd like to make a move for, sorry, I keep getting that wrong, to move the administrative recommendation.
You've moved it. Seconded, thank you. Any discussion on this one? I don't see hands again. Corporate vote. Call a question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to the letter of support for Rogers and Shaw Community Grant application. That's what I've got on mine. So CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we went in camera this morning under corporate services to hear a presentation from the Rogers Shaw Group regarding an application they want to make to the Community Connections Program. And committee voted to move that forward to the board this afternoon for approval, Mr. Chair. So basically what we're doing is, I think, rising and reporting from the Corporate Services Committee, and the recommendation from committee on that was to support a letter of support for the community, Connecting Communities grant.
Okay, looking for a motion on that. Mover, thank you. Seconder, perfect. On the floor, any discussion? Don't see any hands again. This would be a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Again, motion carries. Nothing there, so CAO report. Anything to report, CAO?
Can I do one more, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
So out of the Environment Committee, we did have a presentation on our conservation fund and grants that were being recommended by the technical committee. And committee also wanted to write and report out of that in-camera session, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mover for that one? Moved, seconded, thank you. Discussion on that? Making sure I'm not missing any hands. Director Coyne, go ahead.
I just have a question. Is this participatory only?
I believe the vote would be participants only, but I will double check with our corporate officer.
So in the past, typically with this one, we have kept it as corporate because it is a financial matter and it's
Okay.
expending of funds.
All right, so it is a corporate vote, just so everyone's clear on that. Anything further on this one? Again, seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All in favor? Perfect. Any opposed? Motion carries. Back to the CAO.
Yeah, just two notices for me, Mr. Chair. We do have Budget Committee, our second budget meeting tomorrow. So hopefully we make good progress on that. And then secondly, we do have our strategic planning workshop scheduled for Thursday, December 8th. So next week at the Convention Center.
Okay. If it isn't in your calendars already, make sure you put it in and the locations so we get in the right spot. Anything down to other business? The chair's report. I guess the only thing I have to report at this point is that, and this is a carryover from last term, I was appointed to the UBCM working group in terms of the Fire Safety Act, and those meetings are still ongoing. I just attended one earlier this week, virtually, and they're usually held in Richmond. We're in the process of trying to figure out, for those new board members, fire inspections in rural areas and who's going to do them and whatnot. So right now, we're at the point of discussing the who part. So this could be interesting for the next meeting. I may have a further report on that, but we'll see where it goes. All we end up doing is putting a recommendation forward to the province, who then tells us what's happening or not there. So that would be my update. That brings us down to director's motions. Do we have any director's motions? I believe there was one from last meeting. Director Monteith. Go ahead.
Through the chair, did you want me to discuss it now? Is that the time?
You're just going to make a motion at this point. That was a notice of motion the last time, so.
So I guess my motion would be that the board review the remuneration bylaw to adjust it back to pre-COVID amounts.
Okay, so you're wanting to review that remuneration bylaw. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded? Discussion? I guess we got to discuss it, yes, because this isn't actually making anything other than sending a review back to staff to come back with a report in the future. So discussion on it. Go ahead, Director Bush.
So can I ask?
I see other hands.
What would it be? What's the previous?
Oh, gosh. If memory serves me right, it was half the amount of what you would normally get attending. But maybe staff has the exact amount. Do you there, Christy?
I can pull it up. It'll take me a minute, but it is half.
Okay.
Okay, and the other question would be, when would this start?
That would depend after it's approved, if we go that way. This is just a motion to review it, but.
Oh, just a motion to review it?
Yeah.
Okay. So
we're not making the decision today to put it back. It's just sending it back to staff to give us the yays and nays or the rationale for it or not. Director Holmes, and then I have a few online.
So yeah, just to clarify, so previously, if you didn't attend a meeting in person, if you attended online or by phone, you only received half of whatever it is, your meeting fee. That one
yes.
portion of you attending a meeting.
Yeah, that's
Right.
the way it was.
Okay.
Previously, it was only via phone because we didn't have the capabilities of online. So
Right.
we do now. That's the new part of it.
So could I just
Sure, go ahead.
comment on that? So my feeling is that it might be a little premature. I think we need to get through this winter first, and then I would certainly support a review of it in the spring. But I think we don't know what this winter is going to be like. We could all be online next week. You know, my preference would be to see, let's get through the winter and then do this. Though I think it's also worth discussing that maybe the chair, ought to be here, because it is a bit of a slog when the chair is online and the majority of us are in the boardroom. So that's that'd be, I don't know if it's related to this or not, but kind of. So. Well, yeah, I know. So maybe that's why we have vice chairs.
Yeah,
right? So-
that's true. Okay, thank you for that, Director Roberts, and then Coyne, and I'll go to Director Miller after that. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I look at this as, it's not necessarily apples and apples, it's apples and oranges. Prior to COVID, it was just a phone dial-in. It was impossible to have real full engagement. And the amount of money that we as an organization have put together through the COVID experience and the time to be able to reach out, to have the ability to have our computers working at home, has been substantial. I think there's good and bad. I like being at the board office as much as I can, and if I can't, I also have benefits in regards to the access of the e-scribe and different things that make it easier for me to read documents. And so I find there's an ebb and flow. I don't believe it's something that we should be throwing towards a punitive action to those who may live, again, in rural communities, and when we have inclement weather or we have health issues that preclude us from being able to attend in person. But we are still at that time saving money for not having our TMA or our travel expenses. So it is providing a savings to the taxpayer. At the same time, we were able to fully engage at the board level, which that was not the case previously. Thank you.
I think it's my turn.
Yep.
I was just waiting for you to say something. Yeah, no, I contacted the chair last night and told him that I hadn't planned on coming. We were supposed to get a bunch of snow last night, and it didn't happen. But my family also woke up this morning sick, and I didn't think that would be fair to bring to you guys in case it turns out to be more than just a cold. So, and also, I mean, we're saving about $120 something today by me staying here instead of driving into Penticton, and I plan on doing the same thing tomorrow. It was just over a 3-hour meeting today. It's a 3-hour drive for me there and back by the time, depending on weather. So, is it cost effective? I think so. Is it, are we losing anything by this? No. Most of our electronic meetings, like Director Holmes said, at municipal level, I believe, say that we have to have at least the chair in the office, and I think that's a good way to go. And we can work from there.
Okay, thank you. Director Miller?
Yes, I certainly understand where Director Monteith's coming from on this motion, but I think it's essentially got to be a case-by-case honor system. Other things to consider is that Ontario is considering, right now, they're strongly recommending mask wearing, and they may be implementing it. So as much as I'd like to think that COVID's gone away, maybe it hasn't. Also locally, the absentee rate among students in the schools is very high. So maybe there's a flu going on. I do agree the chair probably should be present here, but one thing that the pandemic did teach us, I think what's been done today, we would have never thought of 3 years ago. Just always simply can't be done. And I think that people have discovered that online meetings, although not as personal, certainly, and can be done, and effective business can be conducted. So I will be voting against it. And also with Zoom, it's great because you get to see what everyone's furniture looks like if you haven't been to their house before.
All right. I'll go to Director Knodel, and then I've got Director Taylor and Director Conans. Go ahead, Director Knodel.
I think through the chair, as someone who was very badly injured pre-COVID by someone who came in ill, I stand very much against this motion. The injury that I suffered was both life-threatening and quality of life changing forever. So forcing directors in under punitive measures when they might be sick is very counterproductive to the whole thing. Further on, 3 years ago, when the pandemic started, the world's gone through an awful lot of drastic changes. We now have 8 billion people on the planet, and these numbers are ensuring further and more severe pandemics. So be ready for it. That's a horseman of the apocalypse that's here now, and it's not going anywhere. We've also spent thousands and thousands of dollars on facilitating these meetings to make them workable, and they're getting better every day. And they're just going to keep getting better. Sooner or later, we're going to have the virtual reality component should we want to adopt it. So that makes these meetings much more favorable. More and more, the world is looking at these meetings in a favorable way. As the chair indicated, he just attended a virtual meeting that 3 years ago would not have been done online. It's a normal component of life. It's also become a normal component of business. So I would definitely recommend against going this route. Thank you.
Okay. Director Taylor?
I personally do get a lot of value out of the chat, coming to the meetings. So I think it's definitely worthwhile. I guess if that's the objective of the review, to encourage physical participation when it's safe to come and when health permits, maybe we've already met that just by having this discussion now.
Okay, good comments. Director Conans?
Yeah, through the chair, I can tell you after being on the regional district board here before and now, I want you all to be here. I mean, that is the value of going and getting a cup of, oh, sorry, not spilling your water, but going across, to get something, to get lunch and sitting and making plans with somebody next to you. Remember the human component of this. And I don't want anyone here, I don't want anyone to be penalized. I didn't even think of remuneration. I was thinking we should all be here. And it's not just, it's the communication that you have sitting next to somebody who's here, but it's also at the water cooler, but it's also showing leadership in our communities, because all of us live in communities where there are small businesses where they have no choice. They have to go in, open up their store and be open for business. And I think that they want us to do that too, if we're not sick. If you're feeling unwell, and I thought everyone on the screen here probably was feeling unwell. That I'm new after 4 years, so I figured you were all not feeling well. Because why else would you not want to be here? Because you wanted to be here. Everyone used to want to be here. And if they couldn't be here, they would send their alternate, which again was great to meet that alternate. How awesome is that? So I'm just going to say that I don't think anyone should be penalized, but I really think all of us should show leadership and come to the meetings. So.
Okay. Go ahead, Director Miller.
Yeah, I'm sorry to disagree with Director Conans, but I think in the winter months, like maybe Director Holmes is onto something, but in the winter months, I don't want Spencer going on a suicide mission or whatever to get here, because roads are dangerous. And I do remind everyone that there's been a fair amount in the national press that working from home is the new norm, and so maybe it's here to stay. I also think, does the board ever have like an emergency meeting where they just have to vote on one thing and it lasts 15 minutes? Because those situations, I think, just to go online for Zoom are awesome, because you don't have to drag everybody together for a very short period of time. But anyways, it is an intriguing motion and certainly worth discussing, but I will be opposed.
Okay, Director Watt?
Thank you to the chair. I don't necessarily want to get too far into the weeds on this because it's simply just for a review, which may come back and say status quo was great. Having said that, I also don't want to see someone try to force themselves from a 2-hour drive away on terrible roads because of a couple $100. I'm not a fan of, this isn't a social event, it's a board meeting. So if you can't make it, you can't make it. But this, now that we have technology, it allows you to actually contribute and be a part of it, which I think answers itself.
Okay. A good discussion. Is further, Director Taylor, and then I'll go to Director Stringfellow.
Well, I just say in 5 years, I think we'd have to be looking at this motion again, because I think we might almost be facing human rights claims or something if we didn't just automatically allow people to participate this way. So,
go ahead, Director Stringfellow.
Thanks. I just wanted to say I wanted to come in and see what this was all about. I wanted to experience the in-person one. It did take me just over 2 hours to get here, and the roads were really sketchy.
Good point. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I won't be in favor of this motion. I think we've grown leaps and bounds by having the ability to come in and attend virtually. The world has changed. COVID changed it a lot. I'm in virtual meetings all the time. I can get so much work done, talk to ministers that I couldn't even get on the phone with before. And there's so many reasons that people would choose to come in, road conditions, maybe it's childcare issues or health, or they're just away, but there's an important issue that they'd like to speak to. And this is a great way to do it. I think it's draconian the way it was before, having to come in through a conference call. And maybe it made sense that you only got paid for half of your stipend when you did that, or you sent your director. But things have changed, and you can come in and you can be part of a meeting, whether you're online, you're sitting here in person. I think it's just the way the world has changed, and I won't be voting in favor of this motion. I don't think we need to review it. If anything, we need to just continue on the way we're going. Thank you.
Okay, it's been well discussed and lots of good comments and thoughts on it. We do have the motion on the floor, and this would be to send it to staff for review. You want to go ahead, Director Gettins?
I'm just going to add a different component to this, but I think it actually is worthwhile reviewing this. It has been a while since we have reviewed our remuneration, and what has come up recently in another regional district is around maternity leave. And one of the things in our remuneration that we have here is that if you miss more than 3 meetings, then you've got to come back to the board and ask for permission to continue to miss more meetings if you want to keep getting paid, if I'm reading this correctly. So what this, and I can't remember which regional district it was, I think I sent it to you, Christy, which is why I'm looking at you, but maybe I didn't. But what this woman brought forward was that she had a baby while she was at her table, and she had to keep going back to the board and asking for extension because she didn't have the child wasn't healthy, or she wasn't healthy, or something like that. And so it's just modernizing some of those components to make sure that this is a welcoming space regardless of your family situation, what you're doing. So reviewing this policy, I think, is actually a good idea. I don't know if it's a priority we need to do right now. I think there's validity to sort of wait in the spring, but I think it's worth a review anyways, and just making sure that we're open to everybody and that it fits into this policy.
Okay, that's a general review you're talking about versus a targeted. I'll go quickly to Director Miller and then Taylor.
Is that 3 consecutive meetings or 3 meetings total or 3 meetings annually?
I think it's consecutive. Director Taylor?
I'm in favor of a general review, but that's not what this motion is. And so I'd be voting against it, but I would be voting in support of a general review at due course.
At a future date or something? All right, seeing no more hands, I'm going to call the question. This is a corporate vote, since I'm sure everybody's involved in it. All those in favor of the review? Director Conans, all those opposed? Okay, so you are in favor as well? Okay, so everybody else opposed other than the 2. So the motion is defeated. Any other director's motions? CAO?
Just for clarification then, Mr. Chair, am I getting the impression that the board wants the remuneration bylaw to come back for a general review?
It might, looking around the board, I think there's a nod from the majority, but it's not super important that it's done tomorrow sort of thing. When it fits in and if there's some time to do that, I suspect it would be okay, but go ahead, Director Gettens.
Maybe something we can even touch on during strategic planning as well to see if it's a priority or not.
Okay. No other directors' motions. I don't think I've seen any hands online. Down to board members' verbal updates. Anything to report from your communities? Director Gettens.
Not really from our community, but I just wondered if we wanted to share the discussion that we had with the ministry last week.
You can, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, you can. So as a follow-up from UBCM, when Chair Pendergraft and I met with the Ministry of Transportation, we talked about two things. So I'll let you talk about the financial part of the public transportation. I was looking for some speed mitigation for rural roads around schools and such. So I actually found her really favorable. Her name is Kindry. I can't remember her last name, but she's offered to come out and take a look to see if we can do anything. And they're also reevaluating their pedestrian. I can't remember what's it called? They're reevaluating their study to allow for more input from local and actual road usage rather than a blanket criteria. So I found the meeting quite positive. So I'll be following up to make sure she comes out and takes a look.
Yeah, and thanks for the prompt because I'd almost forgotten on that one. The other part of that discussion was the funding formula for rural transit. I think the motion went to UBCM actually even, but it sounded favorable. They're also doing a review of their funding formulas for transit. So they're going to be coming back to us at some point in the future. Or, I think it was in the new year. They would be approaching the board to discuss it. And in the meantime, if we had any thoughts, we can send in something directly to them. So it was a decent follow-up from UBCM and did sound positive. So thanks for the prompt on that one. Anything else to report? Verbal updates from your communities? Making sure I'm missing nobody. Seeing none. Go ahead, Director Federico.
Thank you. This Friday, we have our Naramata Slow. It's their second market night. It's supposed to be chilly, so bundle up very warmly because all of the vendors will, and I'm sure they would appreciate sales. We have our gelato business, so we usually do okay during the winter, but I'm a little worried about Friday night. Then we also have our Naramata Clothing Library, and they're open on Saturday mornings from 10 till 1.
Okay, good to know. Director Miller.
Santa Claus Parade is downtown, 4:30 on Saturday. And then you can head over to the V's at 7 o'clock. They're 23 and 0. Wow. And it is the teddy bear toss for the Salvation Army. And you are allowed teddy birds and teddy cats if you want. If you want to throw like a stuffed cat on the ice or whatever, that would be fine, but not at the same time as a stuffed bird. That's where that wouldn't be appropriate. And yeah, so hope to see you in Penticton on Saturday afternoon.
Okay, thanks for that update. Seeing no other hands, I'm going to say we're ready for adjournment. A motion to adjourn? Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.